Hey there, my tired little dumpling, whatever. Today threw at you, you made it through, and that matters more than you know. Set it down now. Whatever is still spinning in your mind, the thing you forgot to say, the thing you wish you hadn't, the list that never quite emptied, you can put it on the floor beside the bed and leave it there until morning. It will still be there. It is not going anywhere. But you are going somewhere else entirely for the next little while. And where you are going has no room for today's particular noise. Let your shoulders drop. You didn't notice you were holding them up, did you? Let your jaw loosen. Let the back of your neck lengthen against the pillow. If you have a fan running, let that sound be the edge of the world for now. Everything beyond it, soft and far away. This is boring history. And tonight, boring is exactly what we are aiming for. We are going to ease into a world that was by almost any measure extraordinarily well organized. A world where the rules covered everything. What you wore, where you walked, what you ate, what time you came home, how you bowed, how you dressed, your children, how you built your roof, how you carried a lantern through the dark. A world where every question about how to behave had an answer, and the answer had been practiced for so long it no longer felt like a rule at all. It felt like breathing. Now you might think that sounds suffocating. Maybe it was sometimes. But here is the thing worth sitting with before you drift tonight. When everything has already been decided, nothing needs to be decided. And the mind that doesn't have to decide anything, even for just a few hours, gets to rest in a way the modern mind almost never does. So let that be the gift. Let someone else's very old, very thorough rule book carry you for a while. Take one slow breath in and out. The year is somewhere in the long, calm middle of Edo, Japan. Not a crisis year, not a war year.
The wars that shaped this society ended 2 generations ago, and the peace that followed has hardened into permanence, or something that feels like permanence, which is close enough for daily purposes. We are in the city of Edo itself, which most of the world will one day know as Tokyo, though it does not carry that name yet. It carries instead the weight of over 1 million people living in closer proximity than almost anywhere else on Earth, navigating their days with a precision that would astonish most later cities. 1 million people in a city of wood and paper and tile, in a valley hemmed by mountains, fed by rivers, governed by a structure of rules so intricate and so deeply absorbed that most people following them have long since stopped noticing they are following anything at all. Morning light is beginning, not full dawn, yet the sky has not committed to a color. But somewhere in the city, the first sounds are already moving. Voices, calls, brooms, the hollow knock of wooden wheels. The city wakes, in layers, each layer with its appointed hour, and the first layers are already stirring. You are in a wooden house. The room is small and exactly as it should be. The smell of last night's brazier still faintly in the air, cedar ash, and something warm underneath it like the ghost of warmth. The tatami mat beneath you carries its own particular scent, dry and grassy, a smell that has been the smell of home for generations before you and will be for generations after. Beside you on the floor, folded with the care that this world demands of all things, is your clothing. And even here, even before you have risen from your mat, The rules have already begun. You reach for your clothing. This is the first physical action of your day, and it is already governed by rules you have absorbed so completely that they feel less like law and more like instinct. But they are not instinct. They were written, refined, argued over by officials in large rooms, issued as formal edicts enforced by dye shops and tailors, and the watchful eyes of neighbors who have been absorbing the same rule book their entire lives. In Edo Japan, clothing is a vocabulary. Every person walking through a street is a readable sentence. The fabric type, the depth of the color, the length of the sleeve, the width of the sash wrapped around the waist, the angle at which the collar sits, each of these elements communicates social position, marital status, occupation, recent fortune, whether you are coming or going, high or low, available or spoken for. Strangers read each other in the first 3 seconds of passing without exchanging a single word because the clothing has already said everything necessary. The government has made it so. Sumptuary laws controlling what people may wear based on their rank, have existed in Japan for centuries, but in the Edo period they become almost obsessively detailed. New edicts arrive regularly like seasonal weather. Officials grow anxious that visible wealth disturbs the social order. They are correct that it does, which is exactly why the edicts keep arriving generation after generation, each one slightly more specific than the last. The 4 kinds of cloth. The official social hierarchy in Edo runs from top to bottom. Samurai, then farmers, then artisans, then merchants. But clothing does not follow this order perfectly, because wealth and rank have quietly diverged in the city's daily life. The merchant ranks lowest officially, but often possesses the most money. The samurai ranks highest, but may not possess enough rice to see the winter through comfortably. The clothing rules try to paper over this contradiction. They do not entirely succeed. Consider the samurai's wardrobe first. Clan symbols displayed openly on the fabric, the family crest specific to each lineage positioned precisely. Darker colors as a rule, deep indigo, rich brown shades that do not show road dust or the evidence of long travel. The sleeves cut for freedom of movement, nothing that impedes the drawing of a sword. Even in the deepest peace, when 2 generations of samurai have seen nothing more violent than a sword practice session in an enclosed courtyard, the body is dressed as if readiness still matters. Because the argument that the samurai class makes to the rest of society is precisely this one, that the peace exists because the warrior class maintains readiness. The clothing is part of that argument. The farmer wears hemp and rough cotton, indigo dyed, not for aesthetic reasons primarily, but because indigo repels insects and strengthens fiber through repeated washing. These garments bear the evidence of the seasons in which they were worn, stained with the particular mud of the particular region, carrying the smell of rice paddies in late summer, patched at the elbows and knees with the same practical care given to any tool that earns its living. A farmer who appeared in merchant-quality cloth would face immediate community suspicion. The question would travel from shop to shop before the day was out. Where did that come from? And the question would not be friendly. The artisan's clothing is functional above all other considerations. The dyer's hands are stained permanently. No amount of washing removes it. The carpenter's jacket is patched at the pressure points. The metal worker's sleeves are singed at the cuff. These marks are not shameful. They are credentials. In a world that values the visible evidence of honest work, a craftsperson without the physical marks of their craft looks suspicious in a different direction. And then the merchant. This is where the clothing rules become elaborate, and from any later perspective, quietly absurd. The merchant may be the wealthiest person on a given street. Their money could easily buy the finest fabrics in the shop, silk weaves reserved officially for samurai households, deep colors restricted to nobility, elaborate embroidery that would mark the wearer as someone of genuine cultural refinement. They cannot. The law is specific about this. Plain outer robes, subdued colors, nothing that announces prosperity at the door. But, and this matters enormously, no rule governs what is hidden. The plain brown outer robe conceals an inner lining of brilliant crimson silk. The lining is technically permissible because it is not visible. In theory. In practice, it appears in private moments, or when a guest is trusted enough to see it, or when the wind catches the fabric on a corner and lifts it for a single second in the wrong direction. And for that second, the entire street knows exactly what kind of wealth is walking past them. This small act of hidden color, this universal, thoroughly understood, officially invisible rebellion, is perhaps the most human thing about the entire clothing system. Rules create creativity in the spaces between them, and the merchants of Edo were exceptionally creative people. What women's clothing tells the world? The obi, the wide sash wrapped around the waist, tells a woman's entire life story to anyone who has learned the grammar. And everyone has learned it. Unmarried, brighter colors, longer sleeves that trail elegantly, the bow tied in styles that signal availability and youth. The palette runs to peach soft green patterns with small active images, birds in flight flowers opening. The sleeves extend to suggest a person who has not yet been shaped by the specific demands of a household. Married, subdued tones begin. The sleeves shorten. The bow moves from elaborate front display to simpler back placement. The colors deepen not to darkness, but to the kind of depth that suggests permanence rather than announcement. The kimono of a married woman in her 30s communicates a particular kind of settled gravity that her unmarried self did not carry. Widowed muted further. The palette contracts toward grays and quiet blues, the sleeves shorter still. The woman who has lost a husband is marked by her clothing as someone navigating a specific kind of life, and the community around her will read that marking and respond to it accordingly. A woman moving through the city is moving through a display of her own biography. Everyone who passes her understands approximately where she is in her story. There is a kind of recognition in this, the sense of being seen, of having your situation acknowledged that is not nothing. But there is also the constraint of having that biography written on your body for strangers to read without your permission and no ability to edit the text. The enforcers and the loopholes. The dye shops keep meticulous records of every commission. They know exactly which fabric and color combinations are legally safe for which customers, and they guide every order accordingly. A samurai's wife who requests a weave typically associated with high-ranking nobility will find the shop gently, firmly, professionally redirecting her. Not because the shop wishes to be difficult, because the shop's license depends on compliance. A single documented violation could cost them the business their family has operated for 3 generations. Tailors carry the same institutional knowledge in their hands. They recognize dangerous choices before the customer does. A badly dressed person, someone wearing colors or fabrics inconsistent with their visible status, attracts official attention. And official attention in Edo Japan creates paperwork and consequences that nobody wants to navigate. The penalties exist and are occasionally deployed with dramatic effect. A garment seized from someone's back in the middle of a market street, the confiscation performed publicly because the public lesson is the point. A fine that eliminates a season's income. In the worst violations, exile from the city, losing not just money but every relationship and livelihood built here. These public punishments travel through neighborhoods faster than any official announcement. They are designed to be retold. And yet the crimson lining persists. Generation after generation, the lining stays crimson. Rules create their loopholes the way rivers create their channels, through the simple persistence of water finding the lowest available path. The turn of the season. Twice a year on approximately the same days across the city, everyone changes their wardrobe. Summer unlined robes arrive on one specific calendar date. Padded winter garments appear on another. The calendar dictates this, and tradition enforces it more reliably than any official decree. Wearing the wrong season clothing is not technically a crime, but it marks you immediately as careless or indifferent to the communal rhythm or newly arrived from somewhere without manners. The city has moved together through the year for generations in this synchronized way, and the synchronization itself has become part of what the city is. You are not alone in your season. Everyone is changing together on the same day. In every neighborhood, the entire million-person city shifting its wardrobe in a single, collective exhale. There is something in that shared movement that is larger than the clothing itself. It is a reminder that your life is embedded in lives around you, that the calendar belongs to everyone equally, and that the season's arrival is not a private event, but a shared one. You smooth the collar of your robe into the correct angle. You check the obi properly, placed appropriately, tied, communicating exactly what it should communicate. You look at the small square of mirror that serves as your morning assessment tool. Everything is in order. You are ready to be read. The door opens onto the street, and the street connects to roads, and the roads lead somewhere. But getting somewhere in this world requires papers. You want to travel. This is a simple want, the kind that has existed as long as people have existed. The desire to see what is on the other side of the mountain, to visit a shrine you have heard about since childhood, to carry goods to a market 3 domains away, and come home with money you could not make here. The want is ordinary. Acting on it is not. Before you take the road, you need papers. The checkpoint system, the Sakisho, the checkpoint barrier stations appear at strategic points along every major road, not occasionally, reliably. At the borders between domains, at river crossings, at mountain passes, at the entrances and exits of significant towns. Guards occupy these stations with the patience of people who have nowhere else to be, and considerable authority over everyone who does. They check documents with careful, unhurried attention. They have seen every type of legitimate paper and a fair number of illegitimate ones. They know what official stamps should look like, which seals belong to which domains, what a genuine pilgrim's documentation reads like, versus the version someone has copied from a description. Their knowledge is institutional, passed from senior guard to junior guard, over years of examination accumulated into a form of expertise that casual forgery rarely survives. The system was designed with military logic at its foundation. Control the movement of people, and you control the possibility of rebellion. The great lords of Japan's domains, the daimyo, were required to maintain households in Edo to spend alternating years in the capital rather than their own territories. This arrangement, called sankin-katai, kept them financially stretched by the cost of maintaining two full establishments and physically separated from their power bases at regular intervals. A daimyo who wanted to stage a rebellion would need to move troops. Troops moving in large numbers toward Edo would pass through checkpoints. The checkpoint guards would report this. The rebellion would be extremely well documented. But the same apparatus that controlled lords also controlled everyone else. The farmer who wanted to visit a cousin 2 domains away, the merchant whose supplier had moved to a different city, the young person who simply wanted to see the famous temple they had heard describe their entire life. All of them required papers. All of them required official stamps. All of them required the endorsement of a magistrate who had decided their reason for travel was acceptable. The process discouraged casual travel in the most effective way possible, not through outright prohibition, but through friction. Obtaining papers took time. It required connections, or at least the patience to navigate a bureaucratic process that did not reward impatience. The cost in time and effort was real enough that most people calculated whether the journey was worth it, and often concluded that it was not. Most people lived and died within a few miles of their birthplace. This is not a failure. It is a choice the environment made for them. Women at the barrier, women face the most careful scrutiny of everyone who approaches a checkpoint. The guards have a specific fear. They have been trained to address the possibility that a powerful lord is sending his wife and children out of Edo under cover of ordinary travel as preparation for the rebellion that the Sankin-Kotai system was designed to prevent. A lord's family was his political hostage. Their departure was a signal, so a woman traveling without her husband or a male family representative triggers a heightened examination. The questions come measured and patient, and they are designed to be difficult to answer consistently if the answers are not true. Where is your husband? Why does your father permit this journey? Who is responsible for your travel? Where precisely are you going? And what business requires you to go there? And why could this business not be conducted from your home? What is the name of the person you are visiting? And what is their relationship to your household? The answers must match the documents. The documents must be detailed, more detailed than any man would need for the equivalent journey. A woman traveling legitimately to visit a sick relative at a specific temple in a specific town carries papers that describe her appearance, her family connections, her stated purpose, and the expected duration of her absence. She carries letters from her household's official authority. She carries, in some cases, endorsements from multiple officials. This additional paperwork is not a courtesy. It is the price of being female and mobile in a world that treats both conditions as requiring justification. The women who travel regularly, those with commercial reasons or those making well-established pilgrimage routes, learn to carry more than enough. To have the answer to every possible question before the question is asked. To wait at the barrier with a patience that does not reveal the calculation behind it. The pilgrimage exception. Religious journeys receive more lenient treatment than any other kind of travel. The government recognizes pilgrimage as spiritually legitimate, practically important, and commercially useful to the towns along established routes. The officials who designed the checkpoint rules had to navigate the awkward reality that restricting religious movement would create serious friction with both the Buddhist establishment and the ordinary population's deep attachment to shrine visitation. The result is a de facto exemption that everyone understands and everyone uses. The routes to the most famous temples and shrines, the great shrine at Ise, the mountain temples of Shikoku and their 88-stage circuit, the beloved shrine of Konpira, overlooking the sea, fill with travelers whose motivations exist on a spectrum from the intensely devout to the thoroughly opportunistic. A traveling merchant whose business route happens to pass through famous shrine country. A young person whose honest reason for wanting to see the sea has been diplomatically translated into a pilgrimage to the coastal shrine. A group of neighborhood women whose pilgrim group has been meeting monthly for years, saving the small fees that will eventually fund the journey, combining genuine faith with genuine anticipation of adventure. The checkpoint guards understand this spectrum. Their job is to manage the flow, not to interrogate sincerity. The traveler with prayer beads, a simple pilgrim's robe, and a stamp book for collecting shrine seals along the route moves through with fewer questions. Whether the devotion is entirely sincere is not a question the guards are equipped to answer. It is not, practically speaking, their problem. The roads to famous temples carry a mixed population, the devout, the curious, the commercially minded, the restless, all wearing the same simple travel clothing, all briefly equal before the journey in a way they are never quite equal anywhere else. The road itself. The major roads of Edo Japan are maintained with military precision because they were designed for military use and have never entirely left that purpose behind. Each domain bears responsibility for the section of road passing through its territory. Fallen trees are cleared quickly, bridges are inspected after floods. The road surface is kept passable through all but the worst weather. A healthy adult covers 8 to 12 miles in a day, accounting for checkpoint stops and the meal breaks taken at the station towns, spaced along the route at intervals calibrated to human walking speed. These towns exist because of the road. They are the road's ecosystem. Inns, food stalls, bathhouses, small shrines, vendors of local specialties that travelers will carry home as evidence of having been somewhere. A traveling economy built entirely around human movement at the pace of a comfortable walk. The stations themselves have become famous. The 53 stations of the Tokaido Road connecting Edo to Kyoto have been painted, printed, written about, described to children by parents who have made the journey and to grandchildren by grandparents who have not. Each station has its particular reputation. The inn with the good fish, the pass, where the mountain view is worth the climb, the crossing, where the river runs fastest after autumn rain. The road is a narrative as much as a physical route. Nighttime travel is prohibited in most areas. The gates of cities and domains close at dusk, and the patrols that cover the road after dark are looking for people who cannot account for themselves. Criminals operate at night. Darkness in the common imagination belongs also to spirits and things that should not be encountered. Legitimate travelers are housed by sundown. The inns know this expectation and price their late arrival rooms accordingly. The mind of the border, return journeys, require entirely new documents. The papers that granted permission to travel outward prove nothing about the right to return. Each direction is a separate bureaucratic event treated as though the outbound journey and the homeward one have no relationship to each other beyond the traveler's body connecting them. This seems redundant from the outside. It is from the inside entirely intentional. The checkpoint system is not designed for the traveler's convenience. It is designed for the government's peace of mind. Convenience and control pull in opposite directions, and in Edo Japan, control wins every time without apology. Most people accept this because most people have never known anything different. The checkpoint feels as natural as the season's clothing change, a fact of the world, not a political choice, not something designed by anyone with a specific intention. It simply is. But sometimes, late in the evening of a long travel day, waiting at the barrier, while papers are examined for the third time with the light failing and the inn still a mile ahead, a traveler notices something. The guard on the other side of the barrier is tired too. He has been standing here since morning. His particular rules have a particular logic that has a particular origin, and that origin is human fear. Fear of rebellion, fear of disorder, fear of the million things that can happen when people move too freely. The checkpoint in that moment reveals itself as exactly what it is. Not instinct, not nature, a choice made by people a long time ago for reasons that made sense then and require more examination now. The thought passes, the papers are stamped, the road continues. Dawn breaks over Edo's rooftops, and the street you step onto is already in motion. Not chaos, motion that has been organized by 1,000 unwritten understandings operating simultaneously, a million daily decisions that have been made so many times they have stopped being decisions and become simply the shape of a morning. The city wakes in layers, each layer rising at its appointed hour as reliably as the tide. The first voices, fish vendors, arrive before the sky has committed to a color. Their calls cut through the pre-dawn silence, specific calls, not generic shouts, but the practiced pitches of people who have been doing this for years on the same routes for the same customers. Regular households recognize their particular vendor from 3 streets away by the rhythm of the call alone. They do not need to see him. They know him by sound, the way they know a neighbor's cough. Then the vegetable sellers arriving with the first grey of dawn, their carts carrying the season's available produce and the prices that the season's abundance or scarcity has set. Then the water carriers, their shoulder poles, bending slightly under the weight of large buckets, suspended at each end, delivering to the households without wells or with wells that do not satisfy. Then as the light strengthens into something that can properly be called morning, the sound of brooms, not city workers, individual households, each one sweeping the section of street directly in front of their property, not because an official will come to inspect it necessarily, but because the street in front of your door is understood to be your responsibility as surely as the floor inside it. The communal maintenance of public space happens simultaneously across the entire city every morning, producing a wave of small sounds that travels from neighborhood to neighborhood as the light moves from east to west. The city cleaning itself. Shopkeepers emerge after the sweeping to sprinkle water on the ground before their doors settling. The dust sending a subtle signal of preparedness to the morning's first customers. This detail, this small gesture of readiness is noticed. A shop whose entrance is dry and dusty when others are damp and settled is a shop that has not fully attended to the day. The customers notice, the neighbors notice, the noticing matters. The grammar of movement. Walking patterns on the street follow unwritten rules that are as binding as any official decree, perhaps more so because official decrees require enforcement, while these rules enforce themselves through the immediate social consequences of breaking them. Higher status individuals receive right of way automatically. When a samurai approaches on a narrow street, you step aside before you have fully registered doing so. The movement becomes reflexive through years of practice, a physical grammar absorbed by the body in childhood and maintained through every subsequent encounter. Failing to yield is not merely rude, it is either ignorance, which marks you as an outsider, or insolence, which marks you as a specific kind of problem. Either way, consequences arrive quickly. Palanquins force complete street clearance. These covered chairs, carried by teams of bearers, transport wealthy passengers through streets too narrow for any wheeled vehicle. The bearers announce their approach with specific shouts that carry both warning and authority. Everyone presses against buildings and walls. The palanquin passes. The occupant remains entirely invisible behind lacquered screens and fabric curtains. You bow as it passes without knowing who is inside. The act of bowing toward an unknown interior is Edo Japan, in miniature respect for the position before the person, deference to the category before the individual. Status determines how quickly the street clears. A minor official's palanquin empties a lane. A senior official's empties an intersection. The shogun's procession empties the entire road and requires every person in every building along the route to remain indoors with windows shuttered until the procession has passed. The street is a hierarchy made physical. Every moment of movement through it is a renegotiation of social position. The masseur, the vendor, and the known face, blind masseurs, move through the city with distinctive canes, their tapping patterns identifying their trade to everyone within earshot. The community yields to them with a particular kind of quiet respect, not the reluctant compliance given to authority, but the genuine care given to someone navigating vulnerability. Their route is their territory. Their customers know them. Their presence in a neighborhood is a fixture as recognizable as the corner shrine. These masseurs travel between households and neighborhoods, carrying something as valuable as their professional service information. They are trusted in a specific way that few other people are. A person will say things in the relaxed intimacy of a massage that they would not say anywhere else. The masseur's blindness makes them feel safe. He cannot see who said, it cannot observe the expression, cannot report the visual context. What he carries in his mind as he moves from house to house is a form of the city's interior life, passed along in fragments and connections that constitute a parallel network of knowledge running beneath the official city. Street vendors occupy corners earned through years of physical presence. The vendor who has been at the same intersection for a decade has a claim on that corner that is recognized by every other vendor, by the neighborhood watch, by the customers who plan their morning routes around his location. A new vendor who simply sets up in someone's established spot commits an offense that the community will address before any official needs to be involved. These territories are inherited, they are sold. Occasionally, they are disputed with a seriousness that reflects their real economic value. The architecture of argument. Public disagreements are dangerous in Edo's streets, not because violence is likely, but because visibility is certain. Raised voices attract attention. Attention accumulates rapidly. A street dispute in Edo draws an audience in seconds, and the audience is not passive. It is composed of neighbors, vendors, and passers-by. who have a shared interest in the dispute, not escalating to the point where officials need to be summoned. Officials being summoned makes everything worse for everyone involved. The official process is slow, expensive in terms of time and sometimes money, and produces outcomes that neither party is likely to be satisfied with. The community's strong preference is to resolve everything before the official layer of the city becomes aware of it. So when voices begin to rise, the social infrastructure responds immediately. An elder steps forward, a respected shop owner, offers to hear both sides. Someone produces tea. The formal mediation that follows is unscripted but deeply practiced, following a pattern that all parties recognize and that provides everyone with a graceful path to resolution. The goal is not justice in any abstract sense. The goal is return to functional normalcy before the afternoon. The Gonengumi and mutual accountability, the Gonengumi, the 5 household groups that form the city's smallest administrative unit, create a web of mutual responsibility that shapes behavior at the level where behavior actually happens. Each group of 5 neighboring households shares responsibility for the other's conduct. If one member commits a serious crime, the group may face consequences. If one member falls into debt, the others are expected to help manage it. If a stranger moves into the group's territory, the others are expected to verify and vouch for them. This arrangement makes every neighbor your business and makes you their business in return. You know who has come home late and why. You know which household's finances have grown uncertain. You know the sounds of an argument through a wall well enough to judge whether it requires intervention. You watch your neighbors because your neighbors' choices affect you in a direct and practical sense, not merely in the abstract sense of sharing a community. It sounds intrusive because it is. It also produces a safety net that no official institution could replicate at this resolution. A lost child on the street of a Gonengumi neighborhood disappears from the street within minutes, tracked by a verbal relay that moves faster than any official could respond. A household in genuine crisis receives help from its group neighbors before any formal assistance could be organized. The system works through proximity and obligation, 2 things that bureaucracies never fully capture. Night and the clapper night transforms the street entirely. The gates of neighborhoods close at specific hours, the food vendors pack up, the water carriers have long since finished their rounds. The street clears of its daily population and takes on the quality that Edo nights consistently carry, a kind of taut, quiet, watchful, rather than empty. The Fire Watch Patrol moves through this quiet. Volunteers from the neighborhood rotating through the duty on a schedule everyone knows. They carry lanterns and wooden clappers. The clappers struck rhythmically as they walk, both a fire warning system and a reassurance that the darkness is attended to. The sound of the clappers at 2 in the morning moving through streets you cannot see from your mat is one of the most sleep-inducing sounds in Edo's auditory vocabulary. It says someone is awake, so you do not have to be. Someone is watching, so you can stop watching. The night has been assigned. You hear it from inside your wooden house, from beneath your quilted bedding, from the edge of a sleep that is already beginning to take hold. The clappers move down the street. They grow quieter. They turn a corner, and from somewhere nearby, thin and controlled smoke rises from a chimney. That smoke, every wisp of it a reminder. Edo burns. You cannot live in Edo without understanding fire, not as an abstract possibility, not as a thing that happens to other people in other places, as a recurring fact of your city's biography, as certain as winter, and as devastating as the worst winter you can imagine arriving without the courtesy of a season. The city that burns. The Great Fire of 1657 destroyed more than half the city in 3 days. Tens of thousands of people died. The smell of char lingered for weeks across the entire Kanto plain, detectable from miles outside the city limits, rising into a sky that turned the color of a bruise during the burning and stayed strange for days after. Entire districts, thousands of wooden structures built over decades, containing every object and document and accumulated thing that households accumulate, became ash in a single night. This is not ancient history to anyone living in Edo. It is family memory. It is the story your grandmother tells, with the specific detail that only personal experience produces. The direction the wind was blowing the street where the brake finally held the neighbor who did not get out. Every major fire in the city's history has left survivors who become grandparents, and the grandparents tell the children, and the children tell their children, and so the fire lives in the neighborhood's memory as a permanent presence, always slightly recent, always a generation away at most. The city is built of wood. This is not negligence. It is the available material, the established tradition, the construction knowledge that exists in the hands of the builders. Stone is expensive and rare. Brick is not the tradition here. Wood is what there is, and wood burns, and the city has decided to live with this fact rather than solve it, which may not be a choice at all so much as the only realistic option. The city builds and burns and rebuilds with a speed that outsiders find astonishing and residents find simply necessary. Life cannot stop for rubble. The economy of Edo requires density. Density requires proximity. Proximity requires rebuilding immediately in the same place, in the same material, because the alternative is accepting a permanent gap in the city's fabric that the city cannot afford. The rules that fire wrote the roofing regulations in dense neighborhoods are the fire's most legible legislative legacy. Thatch cheap, widely available, traditionally used across the country, is prohibited where buildings stand close together. Clay tiles are mandated. Tiles are significantly more expensive than thatch. This means that poorer residents in dense neighborhoods pay more for their roofs than wealthier residents in spacious ones, a form of infrastructure expense that falls hardest on those least equipped to bear it. The government has made this calculation. The calculation prioritizes fire containment over housing affordability. This produces resentment and also genuinely saves lives. Every household must maintain firefighting equipment in accessible condition. Water buckets positioned near doorways, not decorative, not symbolic, filled and ready. Long-handled hooks for pulling burning material from neighboring roofs. Ladders positioned for rapid roof access. Officials inspect these supplies during periodic neighborhood reviews. Missing equipment means fines. Repeated violations escalate to serious penalties. The inspection system creates the sustained attention that panic response cannot. Brazier placement rules are specific and derived from documented catastrophe. Braziers must sit in sand-lined or clay-lined metal containers, not on bare wood floors, not against walls. During waking hours, placed to one side of the room. At night, moved to the room's center, away from all walls, all screens, all sleeping bodies. The rule exists because people know what happens when a sleeping person rolls against an unprotected brazier. Not as a theoretical possibility, as a specific thing that happened on a specific street to a specific family in a winter close enough to remember. The cook's particular awareness. Cooking fires occupy a category of their own. You never leave food unattended on a heat source. This instruction exists in every household manual, every mother's teaching, every guild's code of practice for anyone who cooks professionally. It is not advice. It is the distillation of every fire that started in a kitchen while someone stepped away for a moment. Professional cooks develop a relationship with fire that becomes its own expertise, separate from their cooking skill. A good cook can feel changes in a flame without looking at it, the particular warmth on the back of a hand, the sound of combustion that signals too much air or too little. Their movements in a kitchen create a continuous management of fire without apparent effort, the way a skilled carpenter manages sharp edges present to them constantly, never surprised by them. A cook in a busy restaurant maintains this awareness through hours of service. Multiple fires, multiple stages, the kitchen filled with other people, and with smoke, and with the noise of preparation. In all of this, the fire position is never lost. It is the single fixed point around which everything else organizes. The brigade and the counterintuitive method neighborhood fire brigades form the first response to any blaze. These volunteer organizations train together, maintain equipment together, and compete against other district brigades with a fierce neighborhood pride that turns a civic duty into something closer to a calling. The competition is taken seriously. Which brigade arrived first? Which brigade contained the most? These questions are discussed afterward with the analytical intensity of people for whom the answers matter. The firefighting method appears wrong at first observation. Water is used, but the primary technique is controlled demolition. Buildings in the path of an advancing fire are pulled down deliberately using the long hooks that every household is required to maintain, creating fire breaks, empty spaces across which the fire cannot travel. A few buildings sacrificed to prevent a district from burning. The math is brutal and correct. Owners whose buildings are demolished in this operation receive compensation afterward. The promise is honored with the same reliable inconsistency of all such promises, mostly, in most cases, eventually. The property owners accept this arrangement because the alternative is losing everything in a fire that could have been stopped if their building had been pulled down 20 minutes earlier. Watchtowers stand at intervals across the city, occupied by guards around the clock. The incentive system is designed correctly. Seeing fire first brings rewards. Being first to sound the alarm earns specific recognition and specific compensation. The guards scan the horizon with the focused attention of people who will be paid for accuracy and who understand what they are preventing. The drum signal from a watchtower is a language everyone learns to read. Specific beat patterns indicate direction. The number of repetitions indicates estimated size. The timing of intervals indicates rate of spread. A city of 1 million people receives coordinated fire information through a percussion system that operates faster than any runner could carry the news. Rebuilding as acceptance. Rebuilding begins before the ashes cool completely. Temporary structures appear on cleared ground within days. Permanent buildings follow within weeks. The speed is not denial of what happened. It is the acknowledgement that stopping is not possible. that the city's logic demands continuation, that the gap in the urban fabric is an emergency requiring immediate correction. Community mutual aid takes the place of insurance, which does not exist as a formal product. Neighbors help rebuild. Guild organizations support members who have suffered losses. Tools, replaced materials, sourced labor contributed. The government provides assistance for the largest disasters from emergency reserves maintained precisely for this. The informal structure works because it is built on reciprocity rather than contract. Your help today creates the obligation that will bring help to you when your turn comes. In a city where fire is recurring and unpredictable, everyone's turn is eventually coming. Some neighborhoods carry reputations for fire safety that are centuries old. Others have a different reputation, that specific street that has burned 3 times in living memory, that particular block, where the buildings stand too close and the winds come from the wrong direction. Property values reflect these histories with an accuracy that no official assessment could match. Buyers investigate. A house that has burned and been rebuilt may sell for less than equivalent new construction nearby, the stigma outlasting the physical evidence of the fire by decades. Fire festivals in autumn celebrate both survival and the people who risk their lives to enable it. Brigade members perform demonstrations, acrobatic feats on tall ladders, the controlled chaos of a practice response, the visual spectacle of people who have made peace with heights and fire and the gap between the two. The community gathers not as spectators, but as participants in a collective acknowledgement. These people protected us. Today we honor that. The thin controlled smoke from your neighbor's chimney catches the morning light. Everything is correctly placed inside. The water bucket is full. The brazier is positioned where it should be. The city is at this moment safe. You step away from the subject of fire. You step towards something more familiar, the daily performance of commerce. Your shop sits on a busy corner. The wooden sign outside bears your family name in careful calligraphy, the same sign your father hung slightly repainted in the same style, because changing it would signal something the neighborhood would find worthy of comment. Inside, the shelves hold whatever goods define your particular trade. The premises are clean. The displays are organized. Everything is exactly as it should be, and this is not an accident. You are successful. This success has made you careful in ways that success in a different time or place might not have required. The contradiction: you live inside merchants, occupy the lowest official rank in the social hierarchy of Edo Japan. The theoretical justification for this is stated plainly in the official literature. Merchants produce nothing. They do not grow food. They do not make objects. They stand between the maker and the buyer and extract a portion of the difference. They are, from the perspective of the official philosophy, a kind of parasite on the productive classes, tolerated because commerce requires them, but not honored, not elevated, not granted the social recognition that their money could easily purchase. The practical reality tells a different story. Without merchants, rice does not move from the domain that grew it to the city that needs it. Tools do not reach craftspeople. Goods do not distribute. The city does not feed. The economy of 1 million people requires the coordination that only widespread sophisticated commercial networks can provide, and those networks are built and maintained by merchants generation by generation through relationships cultivated over decades. Both things are true simultaneously, the official position and the practical necessity. And every merchant in Edo navigates this contradiction every day, performing lowness, while conducting operations that the city depends on, carrying the weight of a social position that does not match the economic reality, finding the exact posture of visible humility that permits actual influence. It is exhausting. It is also, in its way, a refined skill. The shop's unwritten hours, opening too early, signals desperation. The merchant who pulls back shutters before the respectable commercial hour has declared, without intending to, that they are worried about the day's earnings. Worry is not a quality that attracts confident customers. Customers who are considering a purchase want to feel they are choosing among successful options, not rescuing a struggling one. Closing too late signals the opposite problem. A shop still open when the respectable establishments have concluded their day implies that the earlier hours did not produce enough business to justify closing. The neighborhood notices timing. Regular customers notice timing. The commercial community has an informal consensus about when successful people close, and operating outside that consensus in either direction marks you as either anxious or struggling. The ideal is to open with the general current of respectable business and close in harmony with it, as though time is not a concern, because business is not a concern, because everything is proceeding as expected. This performance of unhurried sufficiency is maintained even on days when the books tell a different story. Especially on those days, the art of invisible pricing prices are not displayed publicly. This is not an oversight or a primitive commercial limitation. It is a deliberate practice with a social logic. Displaying prices publicly would announce to every passerby what every customer pays, removing the flexibility that allows the merchant to adapt to the specific situation of each commercial encounter. A samurai who enters the shop receives a slightly better price than a fellow merchant might. The margin lost on the samurai transaction is an investment in the goodwill of a class whose informal endorsement or disdain carries weight far beyond the value of a single purchase. A regular customer of long standing receives a price that reflects the relationship rather than the current market rate. A stranger who walks in without introduction pays something close to what the object is actually worth, because no relationship yet exists to justify discounting it. This flexibility would be impossible if prices were fixed and public. The opacity of the pricing system is, from the merchant's perspective, not a deception, but a tool for conducting commerce in a way that honors the social relationships through which commerce actually flows. The books that must not lie. Account books are maintained with a meticulousness that goes beyond commercial necessity. The records prove transactions. They document debts in ways that can be presented as evidence in disputes. They demonstrate to officials, should officials inquire, that your business is conducted honestly and that your prosperity is legitimate. The handwriting in your account books reflects your character. Sloppy figures suggest a mind that does not attend carefully to details. Inconsistent recording suggests either dishonesty or disorganization, both of which are problems. The books are examined by people beyond their practical commercial audience, by guild overseers during membership reviews, by officials during periodic investigations, by the family members who will inherit the business and need to understand its complete history. Some merchants keep two sets of books, the official records that reflect the legally reported version of the business's activity, and the private records that reflect what actually happened. This is understood to be widespread, occasionally investigated, and never entirely suppressed. The gap between the two sets of books is a pragmatic response to a tax regime that treats visible prosperity as an invitation for higher assessment. Micro moment, the instant calculation. A samurai enters your shop. The two swords in his sash are immediately visible. His clothing is the dark, unornamented kind that serious samurai wear, not impoverished but deliberately modest in the way that the warrior class equates with gravity. He is examining a ceramic piece on your second shelf, the one your supplier described as suitable for a household of refinement. You have already lowered the price in your mind. The adjustment happened before you were consciously aware of making it, before you crossed the floor, before your expression settled into the welcoming but unhurried greeting you give to serious customers. The calculation is the price you will lose on this transaction, multiplied against the probability that he mentions your shop favorably to two other samurai households is already positive. The smile forming on your face is genuine. The mathematics behind it would require explanation to someone unfamiliar with how commerce actually works in this city. The women who run things. The merchant's wife manages the daily operations of the shop, while her husband handles suppliers, guild relations, and the external business that requires his formal authority. She knows the regular customers personally, not just their names and their standard purchases, but the texture of their circumstances. She knows whose daughter recently married, whose household finances have shifted, whose buying patterns have changed in ways that suggest a change in fortune before any official announcement. She notices the small shifts in demand that precede larger ones. A slight decrease in purchases of luxury items among 3 regular customers in the same week might indicate a rumor circulating in their social circle that has not yet become visible news. She tracks these patterns without writing them down, carrying the intelligence in her understanding of the neighborhood that her husband's more public activities give him less access to. Her contribution to the business is total and officially unacknowledged. The shop is in his name, the guild membership is his. The legal authority for every transaction runs through him. The practical intelligence that makes the business succeed flows predominantly through her. Both parties understand this. The neighborhood understands it. The official documentation does not mention it. The guild's embrace and constraint guild membership is not optional for a serious merchant. The guild negotiates with city authorities on behalf of its members, managing tax assessments, resolving disputes with suppliers and customers, maintaining the standards that give the trade its reputation. The guild is the commercial community's collective voice, and without it you are speaking alone into a system that prefers to hear from organized groups. The guild also enforces standards and behavior norms that restrict you. Pricing practices, quality requirements, business hours, relationships with competitors, all of these are subject to guild oversight. Operating outside the boundaries the guild sets invites a specific kind of community isolation, suppliers who suddenly have nothing available for you, customers who have heard something that makes them reluctant, the quiet closing of doors that had previously been open. You pay your dues, you attend the meetings, you comply with the requirements, most of them. The protection you receive in return is worth the constraint. Most merchants reach this conclusion quickly because the alternative teaches it. Your accounts are balanced for the evening, the shop is secured, the street outside has grown quiet, with the particular quiet of a commercial district. After hours empty, but not abandon the buildings themselves. carrying the memory of the day's activity. From down the street comes the measured sound of footsteps, unhurried, deliberate, carrying the particular weight of 2 swords. The samurai's world operates on an entirely different logic. He passes your closed shop without looking at it. His steps are measured in a way that is neither slow nor fast, but something more precisely described as considered each step placed with the awareness of someone who has been taught that movement itself communicates character. The 2 swords in his sash are the most visible thing about him, and simultaneously the most unremarkable, the way a tool looks when it has been carried long enough to become part of the person carrying it. You bow as he passes, the bow is automatic. It has been automatic for as long as you can remember. What the swords actually mean. The combination of long katana and shorter wakizashi marks full samurai status as visibly and unmistakably as any official document could. In a city of 1 million people, the swords are a mobile credential, a claim about identity that requires no verification because the penalty for making it falsely is immediate and severe. But the swords in peacetime Edo are more symbol than instrument. 2 generations of samurai have been born into a world without war. Their training maintains skills that the world has not required them to use. The swords are drawn in practice, in ceremony, in the specific ritual context that the culture has developed to give them continued relevance. They are drawn in anger occasionally, and the legal code governing when this is permitted, and what authority the samurai has to punish disrespect on the spot, is both specific and real, which is why you bow without needing to think about it. The placement of the swords communicates even within the samurai's own social world. Entering a room, the swords are placed in a specific position. Seated in company, the angle of the weapons relative to the body signals the degree of formality and the relationship to others present. The entire vocabulary of the swords extends far beyond their function as weapons into a continuous statement about who this person is and what social position they occupy. Losing the swords through dismissal, through punishment, through the death of a lord without a successor is not merely losing a weapon, it is losing the visible evidence of identity. The swordless samurai is still technically the same person. Socially, they have become someone much harder to place, which in a society organized around placement is close to becoming no one. The morning before dawn, training begins before the city's first sounds, in the enclosed courtyard of the Lord's compound, or in the spare space behind a modest samurai household. Wooden training swords move through prescribed forms while the rest of the city is still deciding to wake. The kata, the formal movement sequences, have been practiced thousands of times. The body knows them before the mind is fully engaged with the morning. This is the point. Techniques that require conscious decision in execution are too slow to be useful in the only situation where they would matter. But the situation where they would matter has not arrived in 2 generations. The training that began as preparation for violence has become in the long Edo peace, something else, a practice of discipline for its own sake, a daily assertion that the samurai class maintains readiness regardless of whether readiness is necessary. The form persists beyond the function that created it. This is not unusual in human institutions. It is, in fact, one of the most consistent things that human institutions do. Some samurai find genuine meaning in this maintenance. The practice produces real qualities, attention, patience, the physical intelligence of a body that has been systematically trained. These qualities are useful in the administrative work that most Edo period samurai actually perform, managing records, adjudicating local disputes, overseeing the logistics of a lord's household. Others feel the hollow center of the practice. They are performing readiness for a test that will never come. The performance is meaningful to everyone around them. Whether it is meaningful to themselves is a question each samurai answers privately. The literate warrior. The samurai who cannot read and write is genuinely disadvantaged in peacetime Edo. Administrative duties require literacy correspondence with other domains, record-keeping for the lord's household, the management of petitions and disputes, and the constant bureaucratic flow that governance produces. Classical texts on strategy, ethics, and history form the foundation of formal education, supplemented by Confucian philosophy that provides the moral framework for duty, loyalty, and the proper ordering of relationships. The ideal articulated in literature genuinely pursued by some is the person who can write a poem about the quality of afternoon light, and then in the same afternoon accurately calculate the grain requisitions for a district of 3,000 households. The warrior administrator aesthete. Some achieve this combination, most achieve parts of it. The cultural expectation that they should strive for all of it shapes what samurai families value in the education they give their children. A samurai should be capable of poetry. A samurai should also be capable of maintaining impeccable posture for 3 hours during a formal audience. A samurai should handle sake at a formal gathering with an equanimity that neither reveals overconsumption nor suggests reluctance to participate. The list of things a samurai should be capable of is long, and the daily reality of most samurai lives is that they manage perhaps 2/3 of it reasonably well and struggle quietly with the rest. The ronin's particular weight, masterless. Samurai ronin carry the specific grief of a person whose identity has become untethered from its institutional support. The swords are still there, the training is still there, the formal patterns of speech and movement and bow that mark samurai culture are still there. The stipend is gone. The household connection is gone. The daily structure of service and belonging that turns abstract identity into lived experience that is gone. Some ronin find new lords. The path is competitive and requires the kind of connections that dismissed or unconnected samurai often lack, but it exists and is pursued. Some establish martial arts schools, teaching the forms that peacetime has made commercially viable, even as it has made them militarily irrelevant. A samurai who cannot find a lord can often find students, and students provide income and purpose simultaneously. Some become bodyguards for wealthy merchant households, a transaction both parties understand and neither party discusses with complete comfort. The merchant's money flowing to the samurai's purse, crossing the official hierarchy in the direction the official hierarchy insists, is impossible. The samurai maintaining dignity by thinking of it as protective service. The merchant maintaining propriety by thinking of it as a security expense. Some in the end find none of these paths. The street receives them. The records stop mentioning them. What happened to specific ronin in specific circumstances is often simply not recorded because the people who would have recorded it had stopped paying attention. The weight of a status that costs the financial reality of many samurai households sits in quiet contradiction to their official position at the top of the social order. Stipends are paid in rice, and the purchasing power of rice depends on its market price, which fluctuates with harvests and with the commercial activity of the merchants who officially rank below the samurai on every formal list. A bad harvest or a good one that floods the market can cut a samurai household's effective income significantly with no corresponding reduction in the social obligations that income is expected to support. Status requires display. The household must be maintained appropriately. The clothing must be correct. Gifts at the right times to the right people are not optional in a culture built on obligation. The samurai who cannot meet these obligations loses status in the only currency that matters to their class, and there is no formally acceptable way to earn more income because trade and commerce are beneath them and physical labor is beneath them, and teaching martial arts is marginally acceptable but barely compensates. Some families quietly manage the finances of a samurai household by having the wife conduct small-scale commerce that is not acknowledged as such, a quiet business conducted through the household's rear door with customers who understand that discretion is part of the arrangement, status and survival negotiating their accommodation as they always have. The samurai has passed your shop now. The street has returned to its ordinary population. There is another kind of presence in this city, a presence achieved not through authority, but through its opposite, the art of making yourself disappear. Survival in Edo often runs through invisibility, not the invisibility of absence of not being there, but the more difficult and more valued kind, the invisibility of being present without drawing notice, moving through the world without leaving the kind of trace that invites examination, existing in plain sight without becoming an object of interest. This skill has many names in different contexts. In servants it is called good service, in merchants it is called modesty, in women navigating public space it is called propriety. In the government's own agents it has no public name at all because naming it would defeat the purpose. The grammar of service. The skilled servant moves through a wealthy household the way air moves through a room present, in its effects unfelt as a presence. They anticipate needs before those needs are expressed, appear when wanted, and dissolve from the immediate awareness when not needed. Their footsteps are modulated, their voices are calibrated, their clothing is chosen specifically to not compete visually with the household's principles. The spatial rules governing servants in wealthy households are strict and reflect a deep understanding of how attention works. Kitchen workers do not cross into reception rooms. Garden staff remain outside except when specifically invited in. The household is divided into a series of zones, and each zone has its appropriate population, and the correct behavior in each zone is to remain in it. A servant who crosses a boundary without explicit permission has committed an error with social weight equivalent to a small crime, not because the crossing causes immediate harm, but because it reveals an inattention to category that the household cannot afford. Women servants navigate a particularly narrow path, move quickly but gracefully, speak when spoken to clearly but briefly, appear neat but not remarkable. The precise calibration required, present enough to serve, invisible enough not to intrude, attractive enough to reflect well on the household, unremarkable enough not to create the specific problems that beauty creates in a household, is maintained continuously without rest through every waking hour of every working day. It is an exhausting performance that is never described as performance because acknowledging the effort would acknowledge the contradiction at its center. The merchant's strategic disappearance. The successful merchant's home shows comfort without excess. This is not accident. It is policy. Visible wealth is a target. For higher tax assessments from officials who calibrate their demands to what they can observe. For social criticism from neighbors who have decided that prosperity beyond a certain threshold requires justification. For the government's periodic concern that the merchant class has accumulated enough influence to constitute a problem. The merchant who displays wealth visibly has invited all of these responses simultaneously. Better to appear moderately successful. The shop is orderly and well stocked, but not ostentatious. The home is comfortable, good quality materials maintained carefully, but not a display of what the business has actually earned. The clothing of the household is appropriate to the merchant class and does not push against its upper limits. From the outside, you look like a prosperous but not remarkable commercial family. From the inside, the accounts tell a different story. This gap between visible appearance and actual prosperity is not experienced as deception. It is experienced as prudence, which is what it actually is. The deliberate disappearance. Some people in Edo seek invisibility urgently driven not by prudence but by crisis. Debt beyond the ability to repay, an arranged marriage that has become intolerable, a legal trouble that official resolution will not solve favorably, a past that has become a present danger. A large city offers what smaller communities cannot: anonymity. In a city of 1 million people, a person who cuts their hair differently, changes the way they dress, moves to a neighborhood where no one knows them, and adopts a slightly different version of their name, can begin to disappear into the population. The city will eventually know them as whoever they present themselves to be, rather than who they were. The cost is total. Every relationship from the previous life must be abandoned. The family you are not contacting. The neighborhood you cannot return to. The professional reputation you built over years, now unusable because using it would reconnect you to the story you are escaping. The isolation is not temporary. It is the condition of the new life permanently. Most people who attempt this kind of disappearance cannot sustain it. The psychological cost of becoming no one, of having no history that can be acknowledged, of watching former connections pass on streets you are now forbidden from acknowledging them on this cost, exceeds what most people can bear over years. They surface, they make contact. The contact is noticed. The disappearance ends. The city's eyes, the goningumi structure that makes neighborhoods function, also makes true anonymity nearly impossible within them. Everyone knows who lives in their group. Everyone knows the regular patterns of the people around them. A stranger who appears in the neighborhood is noted. Unusual behavior is discussed. The collective attention of 5 interconnected households, replicated across thousands of groups covering the entire city, creates a surveillance capacity that no official institution could match. This is experienced day to day as community. People look out for each other, children are watched, elderly residents are checked on. The new family that moved into the empty house in winter is met and assessed and gradually incorporated. The looking is social and practical and genuine. It is also comprehensive. Nothing escapes it. The city sees itself through 1 million overlapping observations, and what it sees is discussed, shared, remembered. In a city where social position determines almost everything about a person's life, The community's knowledge of who you are and what you have done is not abstract. It is the medium through which your position is either confirmed or threatened. The government informers who operate within this structure blend in by being unremarkable. They pose as artisans or neighborhood fixtures, which they are in addition to their other function. Their actual work observing, documenting, reporting the political temperature of specific neighborhoods, flagging unusual concentrations of discontented samurai or circulating pamphlets that push against the official position, is invisible because it is conducted entirely within the texture of ordinary life. The most effective informer never needs to ask unusual questions or go to unusual places. They simply pay attention more carefully than their neighbors and record what their neighbors miss and send it upward through channels their neighbors are unaware of. They live and die known only as a familiar face on a particular street. Their actual work is their secret. Secrets in Edo are kept through the simplest and most reliable method: nobody is told. The balance point. Everyone in Edo has a practiced version of invisibility. It scales with need, varies with context, manifests differently across classes and genders and occupations. But the underlying skill being present without drawing the particular kind of notice that creates problems is universal. The city contains 1 million people navigating the narrow space between too visible and too invisible. Too visible invites scrutiny, envy, official attention, the social weight of being known as someone who does not know their place. Too invisible suggests something to hide, marks you as either marginal or suspicious, removes you from the networks of obligation and reciprocity that constitute social safety. The balance point is not fixed. It shifts with circumstances, with the mood of local officials, with the season's political weather. Finding it and maintaining it requires constant adjustment, the kind of attention that never fully rests. The smell of rice cooking reaches you from somewhere nearby. The sound of a ladle against a pot. The warmth of a kitchen carrying through a wooden wall. It is time to eat. The smell of rice cooking is the smell of safety. In a city built on a rice economy, in a household whose comfort can be measured in how white that rice is, the specific starch-sweet steam that rises from a covered pot carries meaning that goes beyond nutrition. It means the day has produced enough. It means the household is intact. It means tonight is not one of the nights that requires calculation about portions. The white. That means everything. Rice in Edo Japan is not simply food. It is the currency of the samurai economy, the basis of tax collection, the standard by which domain income is measured, the product whose availability determines whether a city eats or struggles. 1 koku, the rice needed to feed 1 person for 1 year, is the basic unit of stipend calculation for the entire samurai class. The domain that produces 500,000 koku is 500,000 times more powerful in the government's arithmetic than a domain that produces 1. White rice, polished white, gleaming the bran, fully removed, is luxury and status condensed into a bowl. The polishing process takes time and labor. It removes nutrients while creating prestige. Brown rice, nutritionally superior, is the food of the rural poor, the people who cannot afford to have their rice polished, the people who eat what they have rather than what signals their position. Most households in Edo eat something in between. Fully polished white rice appears at celebrations, at formal meals in wealthy households, as a matter of daily course. The degree of polish in the rice on your table tells any visitor something about your household's circumstances, and the visitors know how to read it. The morning bowl. The first meal of the day arrives early, built around what the evening before left behind. Yesterday's rice reheated or repurposed. A bowl of miso soup, the fermented soybean paste, dissolving into hot water, releasing a depth of savory warmth that has been the smell of Japanese mornings for centuries. Pickled vegetables from last season's preservation, bright, sharp, contrasting with the quiet flavors of everything else. This meal is quick and sustaining, and essentially the same every morning for most households. The sameness is not monotony, it is reliability. The morning bowl is not an aesthetic experience. It is the efficient transfer of energy from the household's stored resources into the body that will spend the day working. There is satisfaction in a system that does not require decision. The morning bowl is always ready. You always know what it will be. This consistency is its own kind of comfort. The evening elaboration, the evening meal allows more care. Fresh rice, the day's new cooking, not a reheating its steam, carrying that particular sweetness that leftover rice cannot reproduce. The pot is tended carefully. The moment when the rice transitions from water-added grain to cooked, separate, properly textured preparation is known by sound and smell as much as by time. An experienced cook does not need to open the pot to know. Additional dishes gather around the rice bowl according to season and household means. Fish prepared in the method that the household has refined over years, grilled over charcoal, simmered in a broth, flavored with soy and sake, and a careful measure of sweetness, dried and reconstituted for the households that cannot afford fresh. Seasonal vegetables, bean curd in the endless variations that a single ingredient produces when the culture has had centuries to explore it. Presentation matters even in ordinary households. Food arranged with care is believed to taste better. And this belief may be correct in the sense that care is itself a flavor, that the attention paid to the placement of a pickled plum beside a bowl of rice is tasted in the eating of it. This is not mysticism. It is the recognition that eating is not purely nutritional, that the context of food is part of the food, the rules of the table. Chopsticks carry specific prohibitions rooted in their resemblance to funeral practice. Chopsticks standing upright in a bowl of rice are placed exactly that way in offerings made to the dead. The incense stick resonance is obvious and immediate. To do this at a dinner table is to bring the wrong occasion into the room. The prohibition is so deeply embedded that witnessing it done creates a physical discomfort that arrives before any conscious recognition of why. Passing food from chopstick to chopstick echoes the ceremony of handling cremated bone fragments. After cremation, the family members passing the remains between them on the way to the urn. At a meal, this gesture imports a funeral into the dinner. The gut-level wrongness of it precedes explanation. These prohibitions are not remembered as rules by people who have grown up with them. They are felt as things that are simply not done the way walking into a stranger's house without removing your shoes is felt rather than calculated. The body has absorbed the prohibition more completely than any rule could accomplish. Tea accompanies every meal and most of the intervals between meals. Green tea prepared with attention to water temperature and steeping time, because the difference between properly prepared tea and careless tea is real and noticeable and reflects on the household that prepared it. A guest who receives poorly prepared tea receives a message about the household's relationship to the details of hospitality. The message is received whether it is intended or not, the seasonal imperative. You eat what the season provides. This is not philosophy, it is the practical consequence of a food supply that cannot be significantly manipulated. Preservation techniques extend availability. Pickled vegetables survive months, dried fish, indefinitely fermented products that improve with age. These preserved foods supplement fresh ingredients through lean periods and form the backbone of winter cooking when fresh options contract. But truly fresh food is irreducibly seasonal, and seasonal food is understood to taste different better than its preserved version. The first fresh eggplant of summer tastes like summer itself. The last eggplant of the season preserved in salt tastes like something else, something valuable and different but not the same thing. Paying attention to this difference is considered a form of cultural literacy. Noticing the specific quality of what the season is offering right now at this particular point in its availability is part of what it means to eat properly. Waste does not occur. Nothing edible leaves the kitchen unused in any form. Scraps feed animals or return to the garden as amendment. The logic is not environmental philosophy, it is the deep memory of scarcity written into household practice by generations who have known hunger. The famine years are family stories. The emergency rice stores the government maintains for genuine crises are mentioned in every discussion of what could happen if the harvest fails again. The household that wastes food is borrowing against a future that history has shown to be unreliable. The sake exchange. Sake at a formal gathering operates through specific ritual that transforms drinking from personal consumption into social act. You do not fill your own cup. You fill your neighbor's, they fill yours. The cup offered and accepted creates an obligation, a thread of connection and reciprocity that the evening's conversation will elaborate. To refuse a cup offered with genuine intention is to refuse the connection it carries, which is a social act with consequences the sake itself never intended. Drinking alone is discouraged not because solitary drinking is considered morally problematic, but because it suggests grief or trouble that the person drinking alone has something they need to process that the company of others would not absorb. When a neighbor is seen drinking alone, the neighborhood notices and considers whether the noticing requires a response. The evening meal is finished. The brazier has been moved to its correct nighttime position. Outside, the fire watch patrol has begun its rounds, the sound of the wooden clappers moving through the street, steady and reassuring, marking the city's nightly transition into its night form, from across-a-wall music. The gate of Yoshiwara stands at the end of a specific road, and crossing through it is understood by everyone who does it to constitute a specific kind of choice. The city on this side of the gate operates by recognizable rules. The city on the other side operates by a different set, officially sanctioned in their difference, physically contained by a moat and a wall, and the single bridge that provides the only entry and exit. The physical separation is functional architecture. The government wanted these activities contained, visible enough to be regulated, separate enough not to contaminate the official social order of the streets beyond the wall. The district's own commercial interest in maintaining mystique aligned perfectly with the government's interest in containment. The gate is a product of mutual convenience. The inversion inside the wall. Outside the gate rank is determined by birth and occupation, and the two swords in a man's sash. Inside, the more immediate hierarchy of money asserts itself with an honesty the official city does not permit. A wealthy merchant commands more practical respect in Yoshiwara than a samurai of modest means, because the district's economy runs on spending rather than on the official ranking system's theory of social value. This inversion is understood by everyone who crosses the bridge. The samurai who visits knows that his swords carry less authority here than his purse. The merchant who visits knows that the official social distance between his class and the samurai class collapses at the gate. Both of them are here in the same way, pursuing the same kinds of accommodation spending within their respective means. The equality is temporary, contained, and real. The Taiyu and her training. The highest-ranking courtesans, the Taiyu, represent years of investment in cultivation. Music shamisen voice the ability to perform in ways that distinguish entertainment from mere competence. Poetry, composition, and appreciation. The ability to receive a verse and return one that shows genuine engagement with what was offered. Calligraphy. Conversation that can range from playful to philosophical without losing either quality. Meeting with a Taiyu requires introduction. Not from anyone, from someone whose standing in the district is established and whose recommendation carries weight. The first meeting is preliminary, structured, expensive in itself, and producing nothing beyond the possibility of a second meeting. The courtship proceeds through prescribed stages, each one costing more, each one deepening the mutual assessment of whether the connection is worth pursuing further. The system produces extreme expense and occasionally genuine connection. Men spend money they do not have. Some spend money that belong to their businesses. The district's role in the transfer of wealth from merchant and samurai households into the hands of the establishments and the women who work in them is significant enough that the government periodically worries about its economic effects on families of consequence. The elaborate kimonos worn by the Taiyu, layered fabrics in pattern combinations that would constitute a clothing violation on any street outside the gate, are both commercial advertisement and genuine art. The towering wooden sandals, so elevated that walking requires the support of attendants, produce a slow rocking gait that is itself a performance of a specific kind of beauty. The entire aesthetic is theatre deployed, consciously, extravagance as craft. The economic trap named, plainly, many women in the district entered through debt contracts. A family in financial distress signs an agreement that sends a daughter into service for a period of time in exchange for a payment that resolves the immediate crisis. The debt will be repaid through the daughter's earnings. The arrangement is presented as temporary. In practice, the house charges the women for their own food, their clothing, the elaborate kimonos that are required for their work, their lodging, the training that increases their value to the establishment. These charges accumulate. They are deducted from earnings before any payment toward the original debt. The debt grows rather than shrinks. Some women spend their entire working lives in the district unable to clear it. This is said plainly, and then we move forward because the listener does not need to dwell here, but the reality deserves to be named rather than smoothed over. The district contains genuine artistry and genuine community and genuine economic entrapment. All three are true in the same streets. fashion's fastest lane. Innovation in clothing and personal style moves through the pleasure district faster than anywhere else in the city. New patterns, new ornament combinations, new ways of building a hairstyle, these appear first in Yoshiwara's most visible women and migrate outward into respectable society over months. By the time a particular style has reached ordinary merchant households and been picked up by the dye shop's regular customers, it has already moved on inside the gate to something newer. The government issues periodic decrees against luxury in the district, citing official concern about the erosion of proper values. The decrees arrive on a schedule. The district complies visibly and briefly. The fashion moves on. The next decree will address whatever comes after the current one. Both parties understand the rhythm and have accommodated themselves to it. Kabuki and the sanctioned excess kabuki theatre provides another officially managed form of excess. Male actors playing female roles with a commitment to feminine performance that extends from costume to movement to voice, spectacular, elaborate, technically demanding. Stories drawn from recent scandals, ancient dramas, the emotional landscape of loyalty and betrayal, and forbidden love that the official society of Edo suppresses everywhere except on stage. The government watches closely. Productions are occasionally shut down a play that has come too close to criticizing an actual event or actual person, a performance whose audience has become too enthusiastic about ideas the official culture finds inconvenient. The theatre companies modify, reopen, refill the houses. The appetite for what they offer is larger than official tolerance can fully suppress. The audience is too broad, too loyal, too willing to pay. Popular actors achieve a fame that crosses every class boundary. Woodblock prints of famous performers sell widely. Women in respectable households purchase images of actors and display them in ways their husbands choose not to notice. Fashion trends that begin on stage appear on the streets within months. The actor who occupies the lowest official social rank achieves a cultural influence that the samurai above him cannot match. Sumo tournaments provide a different kind of spectacle. Two enormous, highly trained people attempting to push each other out of a circle, preceded by elaborate ritual that gives the athletic contest its cultural weight. Salt thrown in arcs, ceremonial stomps on the packed clay, the specific attire of officials whose function is to witness the match with appropriate gravity. The crowd that gathers covers every class, the shared attention of watching something physical and real and uncertain in its outcome, a form of equality that the street does not offer. The gate of the quarter stands behind you. Its lanterns are still lit. The city beyond the bridge is quieter, and you are walking back through it toward home. The children of this city have been watching everything. A child in Edo, Japan is a small adult in training. Not in any cruel sense, not in the sense of robbed childhood or forced labor, though those exist too in specific circumstances. In the ordinary sense of a culture that does not draw a particularly sharp line between the person the child is now and the person they are expected to become, and therefore does not create an extended period of exemption from the world's requirements. The clothing on a merchant's child is smaller than the merchant's clothing, made of slightly less durable fabric, but following the same class-appropriate rules. The child who reaches the age of comprehension, and comprehension arrives early in an environment this information-rich, understands that the clothing they wear communicates their family's position, and that wearing clothing inconsistent with that position creates the same kind of social friction for a child that it creates for an adult. The adjustment to this understanding happens young and without apparent difficulty because it is the water they swim in. Learning without being taught, nobody formally explains to a merchant's child how to read the status signals in a stranger's clothing. Nobody sits them down and describes the hierarchy of right-of-way on the street. Nobody teaches them the exact depth of bow appropriate for different levels of the samurai class. They learn these things by watching, by being present in the spaces where adults conduct their lives, by absorbing the patterns that repeat day after day in every interaction they observe. The child who has watched their parent bow automatically to every samurai they pass has understood something about the physics of social life before they can articulate the principle behind it. The body learns first, the mind catches up later. What the child of a merchant household absorbs specifically is the particular intelligence of a class that operates at the intersection of genuine prosperity and official lowness. They watch their parent manage the performance of modesty while conducting business that matters. They absorb the skill of reading a customer's circumstances in the first 30 seconds of interaction. They learn that what people say about their situation and what their situation actually is are often different, and that the skill lies in the gap between them. What the child of a samurai household absorbs is different, the weight of status that must be maintained regardless of the financial reality underneath it. The particular dignity of a class that cannot afford many things but cannot afford to appear unable to afford them. The specific posture of someone who carries authority as a form of responsibility rather than as a privilege, at least in the version the culture tells itself. The seasonal games children's play in Edo follows seasonal patterns so deeply traditional that the synchronization across the entire city appears effortless because it is. Nobody announces the start of kite season. Nobody circulates a notice that it is now the time for spinning tops. Someone in one neighborhood begins because their family always begins around this time, because their parents began around this time, because the calendar and the weather and the accumulated tradition of generations align at this moment to make this the thing that children do now. And the neighborhood follows, and the next neighborhood, and across the million-person city, the same games appear in the same season, in the same streets where they have appeared for generations before. Kite season fills the sky above Edo with paper diamonds in every color the dye shops produce. The kites are made by hand, often by the children themselves, with parental guidance following designs passed down through families with the same care as recipes or trade techniques. The sky becomes a shared commons. Dozens of kites from a single neighborhood crossing each other's lines, the competition informal and continuous, the skill developing visibly over the weeks of the season. Top spinning requires different skills, wrist strength, the precise coiling of the string, the reading of the surface, and produces its own competitive ecosystem among children who have practiced since they could hold the top. The child who has spent 2 winters on this particular skill has an advantage over the child who picked it up this week, and both of them know it, and the gap between them is worked on through daily practice in exactly the way that adult craftspeople work on their skills. The street that scatters. Street games dissolve instantly when they need to. This is learned early and thoroughly. The palanquin whose approach announces itself with specific calls, the games stop, and the children press to the sides of the street before the adults need to tell them. The delivery cart that requires clear passage, the playing ground reorganizes around it without apparent coordination. The elder walking slowly down the center of the lane, the children root around them without discussion. This responsiveness is not suppression of play, it is the skill of play conducted within a structure. Children in Edo do not have their own separate world sealed off from adult traffic. They play in the same streets where everything else happens, and they learn to read those streets the way their parents read them, as shared space, with multiple competing claims, all of which require management, and none of which entirely yield to each other. What they know they do not know, they know the accumulation of social knowledge that a child receives in Edo by the age of 10 or 12 is extraordinary by the standards of any later child-centered era. They know the clothing grammar, they know the right-of-way rules, they know which shopkeepers in their neighborhood can be trusted with errands and which require adult supervision of any transaction. They know the difference between the official positions of the different classes and the practical reality of who actually has money and influence. They know in the way that children who have listened to adult conversations always know considerably more about the neighborhood's internal dynamics than any adult believes they know. This knowledge does not feel like a burden. It feels like orientation. The child who knows their world in this depth moves through it with a confidence that is not arrogance. It is the confidence of someone who understands the rules of the place they live and who has not yet encountered a place where the rules are different. Late afternoon light falls across a street where kites are climbing. A child's hand pays out string, carefully watching the angle, making the tiny adjustments that keep the diamond climbing rather than diving. Somewhere nearby, a parent calls. The string is wound. The kite descends. The hands that guided it carry the skill into tomorrow. At the corner, a small shrine stands where it has stood for longer than anyone's memory. The offerings left this morning are still there, small, specific, entirely sincere. The small altar in the corner of your main room is not a focal point of the space. It is a background presence, like the smell of the cedar beams there when you attend to it, part of the texture of the room when you do not. The offerings on it are replaced regularly with the automatic care of a practice so absorbed into daily rhythm that the absence of it would feel stranger than the presence. This is how faith operates at its most functional level in Edo Japan, not as theology, not as doctrine, not as an intellectual position, but as daily practice, embedded in the structure of the household, as automatic as cooking and as consequential as neglect. Two faiths, one life. Buddhism and Shinto coexist in daily Edo life without significant friction, because the ordinary person does not experience them as alternatives demanding a choice. They are different tools suited to different needs, and the same person reaches for different tools at different moments without feeling any contradiction. Buddhism addresses death, the passage of the self, through endings, the welfare of ancestors who have passed the management of grief and the marking of its anniversaries. The Buddhist temple is where you go when a family member dies, for the funeral rites, for the regular memorial observances, for the maintenance of the family grave that keeps the connection between living and dead in good repair. The incense burned there carries prayers into a direction the living cannot see. The monks who manage the temple carry the formal knowledge of these practices and perform them correctly so that the family can rely on the outcomes. Shinto addresses life, the harvest, the new business, the healthy newborn, the safe, journey, the marriage that is beginning with the right auspices. The shrine is where you go when you need something from the living world rather than the dead one. The kami, the spirits of specific places, specific natural phenomena, specific human qualities, elevated to divine attention, respond to specific requests within their areas of competence. You might walk to the neighborhood shrine before opening a new account, with a supplier leaving a small offering and a moment of genuine attention. That same week you might visit the family Buddhist temple to mark the anniversary of a parent's death. These are the same week's activities in the same body, directed toward different spiritual addresses. The consistency is practical, not theological. The small gods of specific things, below the major religious structures, a dense ecology of local and functional spirits operates in Edo's spiritual landscape. The kitchen god who oversees the household's most critical productive space. The well spirit whose goodwill affects the quality and quantity of the household's water. The god of the crossroads near your house, who has received offerings from the neighborhood since the neighborhood existed, and who therefore has centuries of accumulated goodwill to distribute or withhold. These local presences are practical above all other considerations. They are not worshipped in the sense of moral devotion. They are managed in the sense of maintaining a relationship with a power that affects specific things you need. The kitchen offering is made every morning not because of theological conviction, but because the household that neglects the kitchen god's offering is from the cultural logic of Edo, a household that has decided to take a risk that the small cost of an offering would prevent. Why take the risk? The calendar's authority. The traditional calendar marks lucky and unlucky days with specificity that influences every significant decision. Certain days favor the beginning of new commercial relationships. Others favor travel. Some days are unsuitable for construction. Others are unacceptable for weddings, regardless of every other consideration the families involved might prefer. The mechanism by which a day's position in the traditional calendar affects the outcome of events started on that day is not explained by anyone in terms that would satisfy a later empiricist. It does not need to be. The calendar's authority rests not on explanation, but on use, on the accumulated behavior of generations who consulted it before major decisions and attributed the outcomes favorable and otherwise to the consultation or its absence. This pattern of attribution is self-reinforcing in the way that all superstition is. The bad outcomes of ignoring the calendar are remembered and attributed to the ignoring. The bad outcomes of consulting it are attributed to something else. The person who believes wholeheartedly in the calendar's guidance and the person who consults it as a form of insurance rather than conviction often make the same decision. The outcomes are the same. The inner experience differs. The pilgrim who returns changed. The famous pilgrimage routes the 88 temples of Shikoku, the great shrine at Ise. The mountain shrines of the north carry something that cannot be fully explained by the destinations they reach. People who complete them return changed, and the change is visible to the people who know them. Something in the weeks or months of walking in the sustained physical effort through changing terrain and weather in the encounter with strangers on the same road for the same purpose, something produces in the completed pilgrim a quality that the culture recognizes and honors. This quality crosses class lines in a way that almost nothing else does. The farmer who has walked Shikoku and the merchant who has walked Shikoku share something that their different official positions cannot quite account for. The road made them temporarily equal. The completion made them both something more than their position. The stamp book filled with seals from 88 temples is proof of something that the official hierarchy has no category for. The evening ritual. The small altar in the corner catches the last light of the evening lamp. You replace the water, offering fresh water every morning. This is the minimum, the daily acknowledgement that the practice has not been forgotten. A stick of incense lit and placed its smoke rising in a thin, steady column that straightens as it reaches the ceiling. 30 seconds. Less. The ritual is its own reward in the sense that performed consistently over years, it becomes the texture of the day's ending rather than an item on its list. The day began with the folded clothing. It ends with the rising smoke. Between these two facts, everything else happened. Outside the city settles into its late evening version of itself. Quieter than the afternoon, not yet the deep quiet of the watches. A transitional hour. This city has been changing without knowing it is changing. The transition has been happening longer than anyone has been keeping careful track. Living inside history is different from reading it afterward. From outside, 2.5 centuries of Edo Japan appear as an era of extraordinary, almost improbable stability. From inside, from your inside here now in this city, each day looks like the day before in all the ways that matter. The rules feel eternal. The hierarchy feels natural. The way gravity feels natural. Not designed, not chosen. Simply the condition of existence. The city feels permanent. But permanence is a feeling, not a fact. The reading that spread. The government's intention was a literate warrior class and a commercially functional merchant class. What emerged over generations was broader than either intention. Lending libraries establishments that charged a small fee per book borrowed made reading available to people who could never afford to own books. The popular fiction that developed in response to this democratized readership was not the classical literature the government had in mind when it supported literacy. It was stories about merchants who outsmarted samurai through cleverness. Stories about women who navigated terrible circumstances through intelligence. Stories about the pleasure quarters, about love that crossed class lines, about the gap between official position and private truth. These stories were popular because they were true in the way that fiction is true, not factually accurate, but emotionally accurate, reflecting experiences and frustrations and desires that the official literature did not address. The people reading them were not being radicalized, they were being represented. The representation itself was significant. Woodblock prints carried visual culture further. Affordable, reproducible, vivid images of actors and courtesans and famous landscapes and seasonal activities printed in quantities that earlier centuries would have found incomprehensible, available at prices that ordinary households could reach. The image of the actor you admire in your home is not political, but the practice of ordinary people acquiring the images they find meaningful, rather than only the images appropriate to their class, is a quiet revolution in who gets to decide what has value. The class boundaries, money was quietly dissolving. Wealthy merchant families occasionally secure samurai status for their sons through adoption into low-ranking samurai lineages whose financial distress makes them willing to negotiate. The transaction is understood by all parties. The merchant family receives social legitimacy for the investment. The samurai family receives the liquidity that their status cannot generate for them. Officially, rank is determined by birth. In practice, rank is increasingly negotiated by money at its lower margins, and both sides of the negotiation maintain the fiction that nothing unusual is happening because the fiction benefits both parties. The merchant family does not want it known that their son's samurai status was purchased. The samurai family does not want it known that their lineage was sold. The shared interest in the fiction maintains the fiction. But the fact remains: women's economic roles expand in practice while remaining constrained in official description. The merchant's wife, who manages daily business operations, is functionally a business operator. The artisan woman who has developed a specialty and teaches it to apprentices is functionally a craftsperson of standing. The culture does not have comfortable language for these realities. The account books reflect them clearly. The gap between official description and documented activity widens year by year, the ideas arriving through the one open window. Dutch traders confined to the small island of Dejima in Nagasaki's harbour represent the sole officially sanctioned contact between Edo Japan and the intellectual life of Europe. Their books circulate among scholars through a network of careful, quiet sharing, the kind of sharing that acknowledges what it is doing and takes appropriate precautions. Western anatomy challenges traditional medical understanding with the particular authority of dissection, of having opened the body and found it organized differently from what the classical texts described. The scholar who reads this applies it and finds that his patients survive procedures they previously did not survive, has encountered an argument that is difficult to dismiss on the grounds of cultural inappropriateness. The bodies are Japanese. The anatomy is universal. Astronomical observation produces the same uncomfortable result. The sky is organized the way it is organized, regardless of what the classical texts say about it. The star that moves when it should not, the eclipse that does not occur when the calendar says it should, the planet that is in the wrong position. For the theory, these facts do not disappear because they are inconvenient. The scholars who engage with these materials are not trying to change the world. They are trying to understand specific things within their fields of expertise using the best available information. That the best available information increasingly comes from sources the official culture has decided to restrict is not their problem to solve. They are solving different problems. The river that looks still. The society that appears frozen in tradition is actually in continuous slow motion, like a river whose surface shows no movement but which is carrying water steadily from source to sea. Edo Japan moves through time while presenting the appearance of stability. The motion is in the deep channels, in the accumulation of small changes that no individual can see as change because they are inside it. The samurai class is changing. The administrators who carry two swords and fill out requisition forms are becoming something that the warriors who established the class would not entirely recognize. The skill set that makes a samurai valuable in Edo Japan is increasingly the skill set that would make a good administrator in any stable bureaucracy literacy, record keeping, the management of systems, the ability to apply rules consistently without reference to personal feeling. These are not warrior virtues, they are the virtues of a different kind of order. The merchant class is changing too. The commercial networks that have developed over a century of peace are more sophisticated than any single generation planned them to be. Bills of exchange that move value across the country without moving physical currency. Correspondent relationships between merchant houses in different domains that allow coordination at scales the original economy was not designed for. The financial infrastructure that makes a city of 1 million people function is increasingly complex, increasingly in the hands of people who understand it, and increasingly indispensable in ways that the official hierarchy does not have comfortable language to describe. You live through these changes without knowing their significance. This is the universal human condition. The revolutionary events that history will record as pivots are experienced from inside as more of the same. A slightly different year, a new edict about clothing, a new tax assessment, a new magistrate who enforces certain rules more zealously than his predecessor. Nothing that looks from the day to day like the forward edge of transformation until the day it does. And by then it has already been underway for decades. The city at night is quiet under its lantern light. The bell of the temple marks a late hour, a deep, unhurried sound that carries across the wooden rooftops and arrives where you are with the quality of something that has been marking the same hours for a very long time. Everything is exactly as it was this morning. Everything is slightly different from what it will be next year. The night is deep. The sleep is close. You have walked the entire city tonight. You have dressed in the clothing that speaks a language everyone can read. You have carried papers through checkpoints and felt the particular quality of waiting for permission. You have stepped aside for palanquins and swept the street in front of your door before the sun fully arrived. You have tended the fire with the care that a city of memory demands and managed the books with the precision that commercial survival requires. You have bowed at the correct depth and said the correct things and hidden the correct colors inside the plain brown outer robe. You have lived a day in a world that knew exactly what it was. Two bargains. Edo Japan offered a specific arrangement, fewer choices in exchange for less anxiety about choosing. The morning that required no decision about what to wear. The street that told you without asking where to walk and how to yield. The meal that followed the season rather than the catalogue. The relationship to neighbors that came pre-structured with obligations and reciprocities already understood by both parties. This sounds constraining because it was. The farmer's brilliant child remained a farmer. The samurai's mediocre heir remained a samurai. The woman who might have been an exceptional administrator in different circumstances ran her husband's accounts without acknowledgement. The gap between individual potential and structural opportunity was real, and the culture was honest about it only in the spaces where honesty was safe, which was not many spaces. But here is the thing worth carrying into sleep. The freedom to choose everything is also the burden of choosing everything. The modern mind that has no prescribed clothing, no established right of way, no calendar that settles the question of when to begin, that mind makes choices from the moment it wakes until the moment it finally stops, and the choices accumulate through the day into a tiredness that is not physical, but something closer to the exhaustion of a muscle used without rest. Tonight, you do not need to choose anything. The choosing is done. The pillow was chosen, the blanket is the correct weight. The hour has arrived. These decisions were made, and you can stop making decisions, and the mind that stops making decisions can begin to let go of the feeling that it should still be making them. The streets in the dark behind your eyes, let the city return now, not as information but as texture. The smell of cedar wood and tatami grass, dry and faintly sweet. The smell of charcoal ash from the brazier that burned low overnight and left its warmth in the room without being asked. The smell of miso in the morning of rice steaming under its lid of incense, rising in a column toward the ceiling of the room where the altar sits. The sound of the fish vendor's call in the dark before dawn, his particular rhythm identifying him from 3 streets away to customers still in their beds. The sound of brooms moving in the pre-dawn air, dozens of them in every neighborhood, the wave of sweeping that travels through the waking city with the light. The sound of the temple bell marking the hour, not a clock, not a machine, but the long resonant tone of bronze struck by human intention, carrying across wooden rooftops to arrive where you are as something ancient and completely present. The sound of wooden clappers moving through the deep of night, moving down your street, growing quieter, turning the corner. Someone is awake. Someone is watching. The night is attended to. The flash of crimson silk when the wind lifts the corner of a plain brown robe 1 second on a street corner, the hidden color visible for exactly as long as it takes to see it. The child's kite climbing into a winter sky, the string paying out from small hands with the care of someone managing something precious. The blind masseur's cane tapping the stones of a familiar route. The neighborhood yielding the news he carries in his mind, traveling from household to household in the way that all the city's necessary knowledge travels through the bodies of people moving through streets they know. The checkpoints passed, the papers stamped and returned. The long road stretching between station towns, each one a night's rest, each rest a node in a network that connects the entire country at walking speed. The mountain pass where the view is worth the climb. The ferry crossing where the water runs fast in autumn. The pilgrims moving in the same direction, mixing devotion with curiosity, equal before the road in a way the city does not offer. The clothing you wore, the roads you walked, the streets you knew, the fires you feared and fought and rebuilt from, the meals eaten in the proper season with the proper care, the bows given and received at the correct depth. The rules followed so long they settled into your bones and stopped being rules and became simply the shape of a day. The release. That world is finished now. It ended not with a single event, but with the accumulation of all the small changes that nobody was tracking, as changes, the literacy that spread past its intended audience, the class boundaries that money quietly dissolved. The Dutch books passed between scholars in rooms. The government was not watching closely enough. The future arrived wearing traditional clothes, and by the time anyone recognized it, it had already been there for decades. What it left behind is what you have been visiting tonight. Not the rules themselves, those are gone, dissolved into something so different that the comparison is mostly contrast. But the texture underneath the rules, the way a city of 1 million people can quiet itself at night, the way a shared calendar makes everyone's season the same season, the way obligation between neighbors creates safety that no official can fully replicate, the way a single hidden lining of crimson silk carries joy through a plain brown day. These things do not require the rules that produce them. They require only the attention that recognizes them. Let your breath slow now the way evening slows a city. Let your body settle the way snow settles on a quiet street, covering everything, equally muffling everything, making the familiar strange and soft. There is nothing to decide, nothing to solve. The accounts are balanced, the fire is tended, the papers are in order, the street outside is attended to by people whose job tonight is to keep watching so you can stop. You are in a wooden house, or you are in a different kind of house, entirely in a different century, with different walls and a different view outside the window. Both things are true. The body in the bed is yours. The city behind your eyes is one that knew exactly what it was for, as long as it could hold the knowing. And the knowing was in its way a kind of peace. The bell marks its hour. The clappers turn the corner. The cedar smell is in the air. Let it carry you the rest of the way.